Good evening, everyone. I'm Gene Bailey. You're watching FlashPoint. Glad you're with us tonight. America rocking today with the news from last night's attack, Israel attacking Iran's nuclear bases. Strength of a lion. Let me welcome my panelists tonight, Lance Wallnau and Chad Connolly. Lance, when you see the strength of a lion, is a very interesting name for this operation that Israel has chosen.
Well, it has to have the strength of a lion, and you know, it's the lion I think is associated with the Benjamin tribe of Benjamin Netanyahu. So the reality is that when you get to a point of a certain tipping point in the nuclear fission process, you can create the nuclear weapon. And Israel's looking at a different clock than Donald Trump, our president, with his negotiations. He has run the clock as long as he can, looking for a peaceful solution. But Netanyahu knows that he has to strike. You remember, they early on they did damage to the satellites and to the ability to detect the planes coming in. Right. They hit missile launchers earlier with an earlier round. Now what they're doing is they're going after the actual nuclear labs themselves and the personnel. And of course, the great concern is there's 2,000 ballistic missiles that are somewhere in various phases of deployment in Iran, and the possibility of a mass response is what could be hard for their Operation, Iron Dome to intercept. So this is what's going to be happening during today's news cycle.
You know, Chad, let me bring you into the conversation. What's at stake here for America, even though they're not involved, so to speak, yet? What's the risk here that we have to deal with?
You know, I think we all grow up as Christians having a keen awareness of the Middle East and realizing it's a powder keg. It always has been. It probably always will be. Little old Israel's there in the midst of, I don't know how many different Muslim nations that hate them. You got to have an admiration for the Trump administration and for Steve Witkoff doing his best to forge some type of agreement, some type of reconciliation. But I think that most of us in the Christian sphere agree with our buddy Joel Rosenberg, who says when people who are evil make promises, it's best to believe them. And you know that Iran is always coveted having a nuclear weapon. And there's never been any question in my mind since the fall of the Shah of Iran that they're wanting their main goal is to wipe Israel off the map. And we're right behind it. But, as the Middle East goes, a lot of times so goes the world in a lot of ways. And it impacts everybody in every way. So you have to think that we're on the cusp of something that could be much bigger. Now, I do think that Israel's got to feel pretty good in the U.S. having their backs. I know when I was over there just a month and a half ago, the Israeli people were fired. Donald Trump is president instead of Kamala Harris, and they're looking at an administration that's actually got their back. It means a lot to us and to the world, though.
Without a doubt. Lance, what do you think? What is the line that makes America get involved? Is it an attack on the U.S. soil?
Oh, well, of course, it's going to be, it would be when you have American casualties. We're very sensitive to the loss of life. And when you have innocent Americans that are targeted, that would be a great mistake. I think Iran almost knows that. In their rage, they will unleash their fury, I think, symbolically against us. But you remember the last time that they attacked us, Donald Trump had like 52 jets ready and assembled to go fly in to Iran to deal with them, and they made sure that they hit sand and they didn't hit American personnel. So they're aware of this. Of course, the genius of Donald Trump was that he went through the region strengthening the Abraham Accord nations so that there will, of course, be serious denunciations because Israel isn't popular, as Chad said, to the Muslim community, but neither is Iran. And they recognize Iran is a lethal threat to the region. So there's nobody, actually, that wants to see Iran in possession of a nuclear terrorist capacity. So there'll be loud denunciations. And of course, in America, our nut jobs are going to add that to why they burn the American flag in the streets. But I think overall, you're going to see that the response of the world will be a sigh of relief that nuclear capacity isn't in Iran's possession. Let's hope they succeed in that.
So true. Well, we'll continue to monitor that as long as we, something to consider. We will be monitoring that along with all our news agency friends out there. We'll get back to you just as soon as we know more. All right. By the way, if you're not a part of the FlashPoint War Room, now would be a great time to go sign up. fparmy.com/war room. This is where we attack these sort of things in prayer. It's a prayer community. It's not spooky. We're going to give you the emails when there needs to be one about how to pray. We have certain people that we will call on from time to time. Lance, we got to get Lance to do one. He needs to do that so that we can send out, this is how we pray. This is how we pray specifically. What targets do we need? It's a great thing. There's about 15,000 people over there in the war room. So go sign up, be a part. Doesn't cost you anything. It's just a place where we all come together as a community and pray and be a part. So go over to the website, the War Room site. All right. In other news, yesterday, we did not get to this on the show. I do want to talk about this flight that happened to London from India. Watch.
Horrifying scenes in India. Huge plumes of smoke rising over the western city of Ahmedabad. Air India Flight 171, bound for London Gatwick, disappeared from radar within seconds of departure. Eyewitnesses say the jet plunged and erupted into flames, with 242 people on board. Flight tracking data shows the Boeing 787 lost signal at 625 feet, less than a minute after takeoff.
This is a Boeing 787. This will be the first accident involving a 787, and it just celebrated 1 billion passengers carried safely over 11 years. It's basically had a flawless record. Up till today, no passenger has been lost on this Boeing 787.
Its safety record, until today, virtually spotless. The crash site near a heavily populated area, now swarming with emergency teams. India's civil aviation minister says all agencies are on high alert, coordinating rescue and recovery. Gatwick Airport, where Flight 171 was supposed to land, confirmed the incident. Instead of welcoming loved ones, families there are now contacting Air India's emergency support center.
Horrible, horrible crash. We don't know cause of it yet. There was a recording from the flight deck saying that there was issue with some of the maneuvering flaps. Of course, there's always a curiosity. Was there any foul play aboard? Was there everything with weight and balance? We'll have to wait and see what happens with that. We'll continue to monitor that. There's not much more to tell you about that other than to show you what had happened. Let me show you this, though. Speaking of what we're dealing with Iran and Israel, worldwide, Al-Qaeda did make a comment calling Muslims to action. Watch.
The leader of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula has issued a, let's call it, dramatic edict telling Muslims to do everything from assassinating President Trump to attacking companies owned by Elon Musk. Here are a few examples from his tirade.
فدونكم عتاة الأرض وأكابر مجرميها فهذا ترامب ونائبه وهذا مستشاره وداعمه ماليا وإداريا وتقنيا إيلون ماسك وهذان وزيرا خارجيته ودفاعه وأهلوهم أجمعين وكل من يمت لساسة البيت الأبيض بصلة أو قرابة فلا خطوط حمراء بعد ما جرى ويجري لأهلنا في غزة من حرب إبادة وتقتيل ممنهج مقصود للنساء والأطفال وكبار السن فالمعاملة بالمثل مشروعة خاصة وهم مستمرون في قتلهم لنسائنا وأطفالنا في كل من فلسطين وسورية والصومال واليمن فمتى هم كفوا كففنا ودونكم مجلس الشيوخ مجلس الصهاينة الحقيقيين فهؤلاء هم وكر الشرور وجحر القيح والخبث ودونكم المؤسسات الداعمة لليهود والحكومة الأمريكية كمثل ميكروسوفت وكل شركة داعمة للجيش الأمريكي ولسلاح الجو أو البحرية وأي شركة مصنعة للذخيرة وغيرها ودونكم مؤسسات إيلون ماسك فهي هدف مشروع، وكل من على شاكلته ممن يشاركهم في الحرب على المسلمين.
Chad, in light of what we know, what happened last night, this is a bit frightening.
You know, it goes back to what we said. These are people who think it's okay to cross into Israel on October 7th and butcher men, women, and children, defenseless men, women, and children in the most heinous, demonic ways. And they're okay with that kind of thing. So it's not unusual, I think, and unanticipated for them to call for an international uprising of more jihad. You know, it's an interesting time, Gene. There's no question about it. And I think that part of what the Abraham Accords were about in the first Trump administration, and what we should be hopeful for, is that moderate Muslim nations recognize the problem with this jihadi attitude. And they see it coming from the terrorist state of Iran, and they see it from Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, and they don't want that. They know that it causes unrest throughout the entire region. I think we as Americans ought to be on our guard. There's no question every Christian out there ought to be thankful that a guy named Mike Huckabee is the ambassador in Israel. He's a praying man, he's a godly man, and that Donald J. Trump is sitting in the White House directing the United States response to whatever these jihadis pull next.
How about you, Lance? What do you think? What is it we need to take away from this?
Do you have information on where that was broadcast from? What nation?
No, I don't have the source from where it goes, other than it was out there.
Well, it's interesting. Well, what you're going to see is that it's exactly that kind of rhetoric that is actually, you'd be surprised, Gene, how the governments that are in the region are not really interested in having that kind of anarchy unleashed in their country. The Saudis don't want it. And so all that I'm going to say is this. When a person identifies themselves publicly, saying what that man said, he puts himself into an interesting position, because that kind of threat with the American intelligence community, working with the intelligence allies we have in the Arab nations, something like that is actually provocative to the point where you might be surprised to see how the Arab nations themselves start to seize on that and clean it up, because they do not want anarchy in their countries. They want economic stability.
Well, something you brought up earlier about Iran. I mean, the Houthis, Hamas, it all points back to Iran. The common denominator here that we're dealing with. When it comes to that, I agree with you, but this is the time for these other nations to rise up and say, we don't endorse this, because I believe there is concern. Thankfully, we have a president in charge right now that says, we're not going to deal with this. And I think, like Chad, you were saying earlier, the Israelis are very happy that we're seeing President Trump in office versus a Joe Biden administration right now. We would be looking at a totally different scenario right now, wouldn't we, Chad?
You know, when we landed in Tel Aviv, and when you see Donald Trump posters and huge banners flying from Tel Aviv buildings and from buildings in Jerusalem, you realize the Israelis are very happy. You know, give credit where credit's due. At first, the Biden administration was backing Israel after the onset of hostilities on October 7th. But over time, it was pretty clear to me, talking to members of the Knesset and our evangelical pastor group, we took 20 pastors over there. We sat down with President Herzog. It was clear to me, although he was very diplomatic, he personally was quite thankful that the Donald Trump administration was in place instead of a Kamala Harris administration. So, yes, there's no doubt in my mind, they see that when America has their back, they have a lot more latitude to respond to these crazy people. And I think Lance is right. A lot of these countries don't want this to happen. I'm prayerful that in this administration, we expand those Abraham Accords and we take those moderate Muslim nations to quell and quench some of this desire for hatred and anger and violence that is just open anarchy in the streets of these nations.
Well, speaking in the streets of the nations, we've got our own battles right here at home that we're working on. Let me show you Caroline Levitt's statement that she did yesterday and her warning. Watch.
Left-wing radicals waving foreign flags viciously attacked ICE and Border Patrol agents as well as Los Angeles police officers. These criminals injured police, threw rocks at police cars and officers, burned vehicles, shut down freeways, and lobbed Molotov cocktails, all because the Trump administration was removing violent criminal illegal aliens from the city. These attacks were aimed not just at law enforcement, but at American culture and society itself. Rioters burned American flags, chanted "Death to ICE," and spray-painted anti-American slogans on buildings. But President Trump will never allow mob rule to prevail in America. The most basic duty of government is to preserve law and order, and this administration embraces that sacred responsibility. Democrats like Governor Gavin Newsom and Mayor Karen Bass shamefully failed to meet their sworn obligations to their citizens. They didn't have the courage to do the right thing and protect law-abiding Californians from rioters. That's why President Trump deployed the National Guard and mobilized Marines to end the chaos and restore law and order. The mob violence is being stomped out. The criminals responsible will be swiftly brought to justice, and the Trump administration's operations to arrest illegal aliens are continuing unabated.
All right, Lance, your thoughts on Caroline Leavitt's comments there?
Well, let me throw something out, Gene, that has to be on your mind at some point. I was surprised that that guy in Colorado that was hurling illegal, who was hurling Molotov cocktails and trying to burn alive Jewish people, along with the shooting that happened outside the Hebrew Museum in Washington, D.C., with the guy shooting a young couple down with unloading his whole gun on him and then wanting to get arrested with a statement he's freeing Gaza. What I have to wonder is 10 million, possibly 12 million military-aged men came through the open border that Joe Biden and Mayorkas allowed without vetting. And certainly one can imagine if in 9/11 we could have had, the Al-Qaeda crew there in Hawaii or in Florida. What do you think came through the border of the United States? What bothers me is that the guy in Colorado was preparing this for a year. And meanwhile, like we talked about, he even got work as an Uber driver and doing other stuff. He was employed on and off. Illegal, mind you. So what makes me think now is, should this situation escalate to the point of terror activity in the United States? We already have how many hundreds of thousands of agents of chaos that are of military age from foreign countries that have come into the United States? Now, here's the other side of that in the great symmetry of things. If that happens, if terrorism starts to manifest as a response of the Israel-Iran conflict, then it will shift public opinion even more radically against the public demonstrations of anarchy, for it will be perceived as an alliance of terrorism against the survival of the United States. So on the big picture, this is going to be a very interesting next 10 days.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. You know, I remember several years ago, one of my favorite videos to watch was when an actor would get so mad, he would take to social media and he would let you know exactly what he thought about what was going on. He's very pro-Trump. Well, John Voight's back on the screen. He's got something to tell you. Watch.
You're a fool blaming Trump. What are you doing for this destruction of these animals destroying Los Angeles? Are you there talking calmly with them, you fool? They would burn you down like they're burning the cars and the American flag with no regard for humanity. This is not about Trump. This is about protecting the people from these animals and criminals trying to destroy us. And our police force, are they supposed to stand there, let rocks hit them and kill them? Who's going to save them? You? President Trump called in the National Guard and the Marines to help with these destructive, barbaric riots. All you do is cause chaos for the people. You're a disgrace. You're nothing but a lying dog for the hopes of becoming the president one day. And God is my witness, truth will prevail because of your faults and your incompetence for California's failures. We the people, I stand with Donald Trump to make this state great again. For we the people choose Donald Trump to save America, and we're in danger with threats from terrorists now, and we must protect our country. This has now become good against evil, and evil will lose because our President of the United States of America was sworn in to protect this nation's greatest gifts: freedom, safety, prosperity. And he will, because he is the greatest president since Abraham Lincoln. And we the people stand with this nation's honor and respect, and with the President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump. God bless.
Chad, what do you think? John Voight, he doesn't mix words.
You got to love it that somebody right out of Hollywood is actually defending America. Like happened 40, 50, 60 years ago, it seems like for the last couple decades, all we've seen is a bunch of garbage coming out of Hollywood, as I call it. You know, look, I've been doing all the interviews lately telling them all we need is a couple dozen of those liberal white elite women in up in Martha's Vineyard to have a mobile team to run around and run the illegals. What did it take them, 48 hours to get them out? I'll tell you what I think really is happening, as ABC reported. These are just people having fun watching cars burn. What's really burning, Gene, is Democrat policies for sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. I think John Voight's spot on. I think Gavin Newsom's aspirations for presidential nomination one day are going up in flames. His shift to try to be a moderate Democrat over these last few months is obliterated, and he's done it to himself. The fires, his response, his lack of response to that, and now the lack of response to the looting and the rioting and the burning and the trashing of Los Angeles. I think it's ended his career. I sure hope so.
Yeah, Lance, there seemed to be a little bit of panic with Governor Newsom in this latest round between him and Trump. He's being called out, and I don't think this is working out the way he thought it was going to.
Well, his approval ratings are around 22%, but the fundraising's big. You know, Gene, the way this works out there in California, Maxine Walters, Adam Schiff, Swalwell, this is the most liberal state in the United States and the most liberal state for California that it's ever been. So even to the point where I was fascinated with how the arrests were happening, and there were 2 union leaders that were arrested because even the unions are working with the Democrat Party with their contract. It's a financial engine over there. So these protests, for some strange reason, elicit the deep pockets of the donor class to support them in their anarchy. They're so frustrated with Trump that they're fueling any opposition that shows up. The problem is, as you pointed out, Gavin Newsom is making his play for presidency of the United States, saying, hey, why don't you arrest me? And do that. And then, like Donald Trump said, I think he likes to get the attention, but he's really very incompetent. And that's going to be the verdict of America. He's got the look of a Hollywood character playing president, but he's really incompetent in how he goes about playing the role.
Yeah, and remember that Wendy's commercial, where's the beef? Yeah, there's nothing there. All hat, no cattle, all those things that we can talk about. Let me show you what's going on before the break. I want to this is protests are all over America, including right here in Texas. Let me show you this protest in Dallas and Austin. Watch.
We are starting WFAA News at 10 with breaking news. Right now, protests against ICE are escalating across Texas. Hundreds gathered across Dallas and Austin in the last few hours. We have watched them come face to face with police, and we have seen multiple people arrested. In Austin, Texas DPS even closed the state capitol as a safety precaution.
All right, but it's not just there. Let me show you this. This is footage from New York on Tuesday near the ICE offices. Protest going down the streets. This is, we couldn't. To organize something like this, I love how this is presented, like it's all spontaneous. These people are coming out and, oh my goodness, look at everybody's. No, this is highly organized, Chad, in what we see. In fact, let me show you this this is Chicago. Let me show you the protest from Chicago. Watch.
Yeah, protesters have been zigzagging around the loop all evening, accompanied by police, but I have to say the numbers for both right now appear to be dwindling. This was, for the most part, a peaceful protest, but there were some sudden moments of chaos. The Immigration and ICE protest march started peacefully around 5:30 after a short rally in Federal Plaza.
This goes beyond racism. This goes beyond xenophobia. This is anti-human.
Several thousand protesters, accompanied by scores of Chicago police officers, then marched north on Dearborn. But when they hit Monroe, many protesters broke away and headed east towards Michigan Avenue. Chicago police setting up a human blockade at State Street to prevent them from crossing. And that's when the trouble started. Chanting "Our streets," some of the protesters refused to back down. The confrontation spilling into the intersection of State and Monroe, which moments earlier had been filled with rush hour traffic. Observers from the National Lawyers Guild wearing brightly colored hats on hand, taking notes and documenting the police actions. Within minutes, police regrouped and allowed the protesters to continue marching east on Monroe. And that's when things went from bad to worse. An agitated woman driving a small red sedan suddenly accelerated into the crowd of marchers, who began screaming and leaping out of the way.
Diving out of the way, and the person was shouting, and they kept barreling through the crowd.
We came upon an elderly woman needing medical attention who'd been knocked over either by the car or the crowd trying to get out of its way.
All right, so Lance, you see that. You know, this is what we talked about the last two shows that we've talked about this. What they want is they want to push until there's some sort of crazy overreaction and someone gets hurt, because then they can jump on this bandwagon. Look at this is what's happening. These people are horrible. But listen, Ron DeSantis, he had something to say about running over people. I don't know if do we have that clip, guys? If we can show Ron DeSantis. This is what Ron says about, you do this in Florida, guess what happens? Watch.
And we also have a policy that if you're driving on one of those streets and a mob comes and surrounds your vehicle and threatens you, you have a right to flee for your safety. And so if you drive off and you hit one of these people, that's their fault for impinging on you. You don't have to sit there and just be a sitting duck and let the mob grab you out of your car and drag you through the streets. You have a right to defend yourself in Florida.
All right, so what do you think, Lance?
Well, that sort of makes sense, doesn't it, Gene?
Absolutely.
I mean, you got to love this guy, Ron DeSantis down. And you notice that they're not exactly mobbing the cars in Florida either for that very reason. And it's just like breaking into houses in Texas, you know, where people have guns. Why don't we have 50 states. Why don't we have another governor say that over there?
Yeah.
The reality is if we could just continue to educate the American people who are not stupid, and they see that this unruly mob is dangerous. They're looking for the elderly lady, and it's unclear, you heard him say, whether she was run over by the car. Not likely. She didn't look like grandma was out protesting. She looks like she was on the curb getting run over by somebody running her over who was protesting.
Yeah, I agree 100%. 100%. And you notice he did start off with mostly peaceful protests as well. All right, we're going to take a break. More to come. FlashPoint. We'll see you right after the break.
FlashPoint Live is coming to Evangel World Prayer Center in Louisville, Kentucky, July 3rd and 4th. Your host, Gene Bailey, is joined by Hank Kuhneman, Lorenzo Sewell, Lance Wallnow, and Ed Rush for 2 breakthrough-filled nights of bold truth and spiritual insight. Register for this free event at fparmy.com/Kentucky, July 3rd and 4th, Louisville, Kentucky. This is your moment. It's time to accelerate to the next level of FlashPoint. The War Room is calling. Join the FlashPoint War Room, a powerful community of believers standing together in prayer, unity, and bold support. Get exclusive updates on what God is doing right now through this movement. Stand in faith, stand for truth, and stand with FlashPoint as we press into what God is doing in this season. Whether you're a pastor, intercessor, or a passionate viewer, this is your call to action. Go to fparmy.com and join the War Room today.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gene Bailey. You're watching FlashPoint.
It's official. FlashPoint is now 4 nights a week. You can catch us every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. More news, more encouragement, more opportunities to stand for truth. Don't miss a moment.
What you guys do, it's immeasurable.
Make sure you go online and share this with all of your friends, your family, even people you don't know.
FlashPoint, always to the right of center.
It's breathtaking. A tsunami of darkness threatens to wash away all we hold dear if we don't act now. In Killing America, turning the tide on the tsunami of darkness, Gene and Terry Bailey bring hope, help, and chart a course that leads to America's restoration and renewal. Don't wait. Get your copy at killingamericabook.com and counter the tsunami of darkness with a deluge of everlasting light.
Welcome back to the second half. Listen, as you saw during the break, you can get your copy of Killing America right there at the store, flashpointstore.com, where you can get all the new merch as well as the books are there. America is not lost forever, but you and I have got to stand up and take it back and keep a hold of what our founding fathers wanted when they founded America. All right, so let me show you this. We talked about Ron DeSantis. You know, I needed to get your comment here, Chad, before I leave. Ron DeSantis. I mean, that was a pretty risky comment that he made there about, hey, if they're in your way and you feel like you're challenged, take off, and it's their problem.
You know, I've not seen Governor DeSantis back down from telling truth on pretty much anything. So you're right. In our measurement, it would be risky. But, you know, you got to think the left believes that they can recreate the George Floyd riots. And people aren't just buying it. So I think what you're seeing is a guy like DeSantis saying people have had enough. I think normal Americans, you know, we go to work and come home and pay taxes and raise kids and go to church and take kids to soccer practice. And we put the buggy away at Walmart and at Home Depot. And when we see people jumping around like demons on cars and lighting engines on fire and loot Apple stores claiming that it's an anti-ICE protest, we know there's more to it. So I think what we're seeing is Governor DeSantis is acknowledging there's more to this. It's organized chaos. It's paid for. It's bought and paid for. And it's not accidental or organic or some kind of grass tops response to people being angry. This is orchestrated and designed to upset the Trump administration.
So let me ask you this, Chad. So what do you think? And I know it's just your opinion, but what should President Trump do at this point with all of this?
You know, I got asked that on a Sirius XM, you know, one of those middle of the road, more lean left shows. And I pointed out that President Johnson called out the National Guard when states refused to follow national law. And I think that's what you're seeing now with President Trump. He's called out the National Guard because the people are demanding it. You guys have probably seen, and a lot of your viewers are watching, there are dozens and dozens of interviews or just videos, TikTok and Twitter videos of everyday normal Americans trying to go to work, trying to take care of their families, and they're scared. And they see this going on in a lot of minorities. Why are you trapped? Why are you keeping me from going to work? Why are you endangering my kids? And these people who are hired and covered in masks and, you know, Antifa or BLM or now the Gaza people, they're hiding behind their masks and destroying America. I think this is kind of uncharted territory. We're back in the 1960s where the left always seems to go wild and riot. But here's what I really think is going on. I think they're scared of deportation because it is going absolutely to lower numbers in these blue states. And we might we might just find out what the true American vote total is. And I think that petrifies the left.
Well, and to that point, Lance, I'll give you a chance to comment. I think here, well, the election showed people wanted, we talked about this earlier in the week, the Latino vote was overwhelmingly pro-Trump. They're the most upset at what's going on with all these illegals because they came here illegally, and now they're dealing with these people that came across the border. And you got the Mexican president there saying, you guys, you need to go protest. You need to mobilize. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. We came here legally. Why are we don't need to put up with this. This is what, I agree with you, Chad, but I believe this is what Americans and the minority vote has said in the last election. Lance, they came out in droves. The Latino community did come out and vote for Trump in a big way. So I imagine, like what Chad was saying, it must be even more. It didn't work, the importation of all of these potential Biden voters and voting illegally and not having to register and all that. That did not work in 2024. But they're banking this last ditch to make it in 26, I guess. Go ahead.
Gene, will you let me say something? I got to tell you.
No, never.
Before I forget the statistic, all right? My gosh, you asked me the question 5 minutes ago. All right, here it is. In 2020, 34% of the votes of the legal immigrants in America went to the Democrats. Now they've swung all of them over to the Republican, +8. That's a 40-point shift from legal immigrants. That means the Republican Party and Donald Trump specifically has picked up 40 points since he came into office, 2024. So what that tells you is that the legal immigrants see the illegals, especially those that came in under Biden. So you have probably as many as 35 to 40 million illegals in the United States. And the confusion is many of them, as Trump is talking about today in the agricultural field, have been working in the farmer area for 20 years. You listen to Brooke Rollins talk about, we'll have to figure out how to work that out. And Trump is saying there are those that are in the country that have not been they have been law abiding. He's focusing right now with ICE on cartel money, on criminal activity. And so this is the perfect moment because he has not really been deporting at the level necessary. If you think about it, 12 million is the number I was given of illegals that came through under Biden and Mayorkas. That would mean 250,000 would have to be deported every month. So far in 5 months, ICE has only deported 100,000. So this is not the million that should have been deported, but only 100,000. And this is the resistance they're getting, going for the criminal element. So I'm hoping that God will have his way in a whirlwind. Look, when we looked at 2020, we thought, how much worse can it get? We went through 4 years of oy vey every night with the news. But God was working to set, almost pulling the bow back so that when Trump came into office, bam, it was even more powerful. I think everything they're going to do against him is going to work against them. And what they're going to do now in the increase of lawlessness is going to actually create an even greater consolidation of Americans saying, we must remove this radical element, this dangerous subversive element from our society.
Wow, it's quite a ride that we're on here. Let me show you this. This was, we go from all of this, we go from war, rumors of wars and riots in the street, and really, what we really want to know is, can President Trump really forgive Elon?
And what happened with Elon? Is there anything that you can do to forgive him? Could you see that happening?
Well, look, I have no hard feelings. I was really surprised that happened. He went after a bill that's phenomenal. It's the best thing we've ever signed in this country, and that's phase one. Phase two, phase three. All of a sudden, is it all comes together. It's coming together so well. And when he did that, I was not a happy camper. So it's too bad.
You said he had problems. What kind of problems? I mean, is it the drugs?
I don't know what his problem is, really. I don't know. I haven't thought too much about him in the last little while, but the bill is so good. When he went after the bill, this bill is going to turn around this country so fast your head will spin. It's good for everyone. It's also a tax cut. It's a massive tax cut. It's an extension of debt, which we need. We have to get that. And then we're going to start paying off debt at record levels. It's tariffs on certain people. It's, by the way, no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security. You know,
all your promises.
Yeah. And I mean, it's no tax on overtime. If a worker works overtime, there's no tax. That's going to be a great stimulant for the country. No, I think the bill is great. And
he just didn't
I think
get that.
he feels very badly that he said that, actually.
All right, well, look at this, guys. Chad, Elon posted this. About 120 million people have seen it. I regret some of my posts about President Donald Trump last week. They went too far. What do you think happened here, Chad?
You know, my dad used to say that guests and fish both begin to smell after about 3 days. And sometimes familiarity breeds a little bit of contempt, right? And I think that probably Elon got a little big for his britches. Listen, we've learned not to underestimate Donald Trump. This guy has had a plan. The big, beautiful bill's part of it. Clearly, that is just step one in a process of paying down the debt, reducing taxes, reducing the interest rate so that the economy can grow once again like it can, and it will. And I think Elon just kind of stepped on it a little bit. He walked into areas that's not his expertise. He had his feelings hurt, and he said what was on his mind. Clearly, not much discipline, no spiritual discernment, obviously.
Right.
And he forgot that President Trump is the president of the United States and the leader of the free world. I'm glad he backed off. I really am. I think Trump's way too busy for this kind of drama. And hopefully some people around Elon said, look, man, you're out of line here. This guy's doing a much bigger picture than you can see. And it is not all about you. The world doesn't revolve around you, Elon. I pray that's why he backed off and gave that apology on Twitter like he did.
Well, and hats off for actually doing that. It's rare to see that. You know, Lance, what do you think, Elon?
Well, here's the thing, Gene. You know, we all were praying that there would be reconciliation. I'm going to say that there's an element of this, that prayer really does work. Yeah. And what I think happens, and it can happen in media. I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes when you're opinionated and people look to you to be opinionated and to have opinions on things, you could say something that later on you wish you could retract. I think Chad could tell you that in politics, you learn the art of of wordsmithing your critiques, and you're intentional about what you say. Elon for a brilliant man. He made the slip of letting his emotions do the talking, instead of talking about his emotions. And he went too far. And I promise you could see his peers in the CEO realm, the multi-billionaire tech guys. They all privately direct messaged him and said, I think you might have gone a little too far, Elon. That's not a smart thing. But to his credit, he is a smart guy. And he realized what he did was wrong. And instead of just privately sending a message to Donald Trump, he made it public. Yeah. I went too far in some of the things I said. And in doing that, two important things happened. He allowed the olive branch to be extended so that he could get back into a normalized relationship, not just with Donald Trump. He was in his house. He's with his kids. He's in the family. And secondly, I hope our FlashPoint audience, who were so quick to think that Donald Trump and Elon were putting on some kind of kabuki theater in order to get at the Epstein files, I hope we have matured in our judgment and realize that when you're thinking that there's some 3D chess going on and something's going on, it's manipulated, learn to realize that the voices that tell you that are typically not informed.
Something else that's been happening is, if you've been scoring along at home, not only is the Gulf of Mexico now the Gulf of America, there's been changes. Watch this, it's interesting.
President Trump yesterday announcing that 7 more Army bases would soon be getting new names. Those bases, once named after Confederate soldiers, were renamed during the Biden administration. Now the Trump administration is changing them back to their original names, sort of. Instead of honoring Confederates, the Pentagon is dedicating the bases to service members with the same name and a notable service record of their own. Our Jim Axelrod shows how that policy played out earlier this year at two military installations, Fort Bragg in North Carolina and Fort Benning in Georgia.
For the second time in less than 2 years, the largest U.S. military base has a new name.
Today we honor a hero worthy of the name Bragg.
The new name is also its old name, Fort Bragg, which for more than a century honored General Braxton Bragg, a Confederate general and slave owner. A ceremony in 2023 changed Fort Bragg to Fort Liberty. Then, last fall,
should we change the name from Fort Liberty back to Fort Bragg?
Donald Trump made a promise that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth kept.
That's right. Bragg is back.
But not that Bragg. The Army found a much more Private First Class Roland L. Bragg, a World War II Silver Star and Purple Heart recipient.
At first, they thought it was a joke.
Rebecca Amirpour and Jennifer Bell are Roland Bragg's granddaughters and plenty proud of their grandpa.
But if his name was Roland Jones,
right.
I don't think we'd be sitting here.
No, we wouldn't.
While the military also sees Bragg as a brand, a place where some of the nation's fiercest warriors trained, it doesn't see any issue in the workaround that preserves the Bragg name. Gregory Anderson is the fort's commanding general.
To the extent that this was a painful name for people, what do you say to them?
Roland L. Bragg is someone that they can be proud of.
Do you feel it all used or manipulated?
I went through some different thoughts about it. I feel like using our grandfather's name is a way of bringing it back in a respectful way.
It's an absolute loophole.
Steve Moore's family is on the other end of the Army's renaming decision.
When I look back to my grandfather, between him, my father, myself, and my brother, we've got 110 years of service.
They were busting their buttons 2 years ago when the Pentagon changed Fort Benning, also named for a Confederate general, to Fort Moore. For both their father,
I have 2 battalions on this valley.
Lieutenant General Harold Moore, a highly decorated 32-year infantry commander, and their mother, Julia.
When your family found out that the original Fort Benning was going to become Fort Moore,
I broke down and cried. Not because it was going to be named after Dad, but finally the Army was going to recognize the value of the military spouse.
But now, that too is being reversed and renamed for a corporal, Fred Benning, who served with honor for a couple of years during the First World War.
When I compare his short service in World War I to Mom and Dad's lifetime of service and everything they did and influenced, I have to ask the question, why?
There is no answer that will satisfy the family of Hal and Julia Moore, whose lifetime of valor and service to the Army lost out to a soldier who had one thing they did not: the right last name.
Well, the right last name. All right, Chad. Interesting perspective on both ends of the spectrum. Is this a win, or does this even really matter?
I spent time in my Army career at both forts, Fort Benning and Fort Bragg, and I like how the general said they have brands. You know, it's very difficult to make everybody happy on everything. Certainly the Trump administration is doing their best to do that. And as you can see, you're not going to make everybody happy in everything, even when you go and bend over backwards. I think that there's been a lot of history behind these forts, and a lot of people have trained at both places, and they do have an identity. And trying to acknowledge that, I believe, is the tip of the hat to saying there's a brand here. It matters. People think about the fort and they don't think about the history behind all of it. There's a name that goes with, I spent part of my career at Fort Bragg in near Fayetteville, North Carolina, and it matters to those service members that way.
No, that's a good point. It matters to the service members who serve there. Lance, your thoughts there on the name change?
So why do they do that, Gene? Why do they want to rename the school or Jefferson and Lee and Washington and Lincoln High? What the left does, and this is the important thing to remember, is they want to expunge and destroy your collective memory of your history. All the symbols that give you a kind of like a patriotic mythology about the origin of your country and the stories that shape you, they want to destroy them. They want to remove all the landmarks. They want to scrub them clean so that you don't have any mile markers for your history. And like a child that doesn't know who his father is, a citizen that doesn't know the founding of the nation, ends up being more gullible and more susceptible to other people's influences. So the real thing that's going on here is the left tries to expunge the symbolic memory of America by finding anything it can to shame and disgrace and pull down the symbols of the past, when in fact those symbols are actually part of the memory of America, and you need to have them there so you can learn the lessons of your own history.
Exactly, and that was to be my point here. Is the fact is we don't have a stellar history. Where there are some bad apples in there, and we need to be able to look back. If we're consistently sanitizing to someone's role or someone's viewpoint, we miss the whole point of America as a nation, where we've had some horrible mistakes along the way, but yet we're still here. Interesting discussion. I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer to all of that, but it is something we need to consider. All right, before we go off the air tonight, I do want to circle back, to quote Jen Psaki, to a story that's very near to us, our friend Floyd Brown and his recent firing from the Kennedy Center by Rick Grinnell. Floyd posted this clip. It's 11 seconds. I may have to play it twice, but I want you to hear what he said about the height of hypocrisy. Listen to what Rick Grinnell says. Watch.
Mr. Nestor, what would you say to Democrats who might not want to come to the Kennedy Center because President Trump is in charge?
I think he should be tolerant. Thank you.
Did you catch that, Lance?
No. Say it. What did he say?
Let's re-rack it, guys. Let's play it again.
Mr. Nestor, what would you say to Democrats who might not want to come to the Kennedy Center because President Trump is in charge?
I think he should be tolerant. Thank you.
Tolerant? They should be tolerant, Lance. Yeah,
they should be tolerant.
Yet,
that's a politician.
The political statement there. Except here's what happened, with our friend Floyd Brown firing because he would not recant his view on traditional marriage. Now, so many things about this, and I know there's a lot of news going on, and I know we got Iran and everything else and riots in the streets. We must not let this go, not because Floyd is our friend, but because this is a massive knock against religious liberty and the freedom of speech to be able to, because, and you said it again, you reiterated something that Lance, you said something that Floyd had said, I can work with these people. I'm not trying to beat my values into somebody else. I can work alongside, but to say, no, you cannot have these values and work here, that's a total different problem. Talk to me, Chad. What do you think?
2 days after President Trump reiterated the days of woke are over, our buddy Floyd got fired. And he got fired for his stance on the idea of traditional marriage, the biblical marriage that we all stand for. I sure pray he doesn't let this go. And I've got it on pretty good report from some high up people in the administration that a whole lot of raised eyebrows are happening right now because they see there's a hypocrisy going on. Rick Grinnell has overstepped his bounds here. He has become somebody who's part of the left, the wokeism within our own party. And you're exactly right. We do not need to let this go because we would be the hypocrites if we let this go and don't point this out. So I've been praying. I texted Floyd. I said, man, I'm so proud of you for taking a stand and telling the truth like you've been doing your whole career. Keep it up. And there's a bunch of people praying for you and hoping to help you push to get your spot back or to point this out so it ends. This kind of nonsense ends.
Amen. Lance, your thoughts?
You cannot fire a person who is a Christian because they are a Christian. That is the case that will go to litigation. You cannot terminate the employment of a believer, especially for their First Amendment right to have an opinion regarding their faith that is 2 or 3 years old. You cannot go back into a person's sermon file and then fire them when they're working for the government later. The President of the United States actually signed into law an executive order in February beginning a deliberate prosecution of any evidence of Christians or evangelicals being deprived the opportunity to serve in government because they're Christians. Unfortunately, Rick Grenell has just served the ironic situation where Christians that love President Trump are going to hold him to that executive order because this thing is likely going to go to court.
I believe you're right. Probably is going to go to court. We have reached out to the White House for comment, and as of today, still no word back. I'm sure they're trying to decide how to comment. It is a political hot potato, but then again, it isn't. There's right and wrong, and that's why we have the liberties we do. All right, we got 3 minutes. I'm going to give you a chance to wrap up. Gentlemen, I'll let you go first, Chad. Your final thoughts for today as we go into the weekend.
You know, it doesn't surprise us anymore that everything happens at just such a rapid pace. You look around and there's so many headline snatching things going on between the riots, and we just got over all the Gaza riots and the pro-Hamas terrorist riots, and here we are, riots in the streets against ICE deporting criminals, for goodness sakes. And then we got the Iran attacks by Israel, pushing back on them getting enriched uranium for a nuclear bomb. Things are happening, and we as Christians need to pay attention. God's moving. There's no question in my mind we've been given a window of opportunity to reclaim a nation for him above. But we don't need to go to sleep and think that our work is done or elections are over. We need to be vigilant. We need to be prayerful. We need to engage this society and this culture like never before, Gene. And we need to be paying attention to what's happening and not go to sleep in these times, brother.
Amen. Don't go to sleep. All right, Lance, your final thoughts as we wrap up?
Well, all across the country, we're going to be seeing these protests that have been orchestrated about this against King Trump. And, he's going to be having his military display in Washington on his birthday. And what is interesting is Christians are already deployed all over the country right now, Gene, into those cities because the left is advertising where their sites are going to be. So Christians are there praying peacefully right now, doing what I think is effective spiritual warfare. And that's pretty much what we have to do. We're a peaceful people, but prayer is powerful. And I encourage you, if you get wind of this and where these protests are happening, go ahead and go there with a prayer group and take authority over that atmosphere. Amen. Plead the blood of Jesus. Pray for the peace of God to be upon the city, because that's preemptive warfare that disrupts the enemy's plans.
So true. So true. All right. Well, I want to, and I like what you said there, Lance, because here we cannot shy away. Don't fall into the enemy's trap, to getting baited into some sort of confrontation. But we can take our rightful place and take back what the enemy's trying to take from us. And that's what we're going to do. All right, Lance, I've gotten tons of letters that I think you probably owe me about $1,000. But right now, Cindy writes, it's great to learn about people and ministries out there working hard to spread the gospel. I learned things about government and leaders, new things I did not know. Listen, that's why we're here, to help you understand how things are really working behind the scenes and how you can be a part. Follow us. FlashPoint always is to the right of center, but you can always get all of the information at fparmy.com, all about our events, FlashPoint store for the new merchandise, and we'll see you Monday. God bless.